I'm Dr. Donald Crowe. I practiced medicine for 40 years and took care of alcoholics on a daily basis. All the while, I was battling my own destructive alcohol use. I've now been sober for the last 28 years, but in truth, I'd intended to get sober for many years before it finally happened. For years, I believed the biggest obstacle to getting sober was that I simply wasn't ready. I told myself that over and over again. I'm just not ready yet. Someday I will be. After this stressful period, after the holidays, after vacation, once I get my head straight. And because I believed this, I also believed something else, that there would eventually come a magical moment in my life where readiness would arrive, a moment where motivation would overwhelm resistance, where certainty would overpower fear, where the path forward would become obvious. And when that moment came, then I would stop drinking. The problem? That moment never came, not once. And I now believe that this idea of being ready is one of the most dangerous psychological traps that exists in recovery. Because ready is not a state. Ready is a construct, a story we tell ourselves to justify remaining exactly where we are. The reality is that inaction is the preferred state of the human animal. We are built to conserve energy, to avoid uncertainty, to remain within familiar patterns, even destructive familiar patterns, and that includes alcohol, especially alcohol. Because alcohol doesn't merely become a habit, it becomes woven into the architecture of our daily life. It dictates routines, social interactions, stress relief, celebration, escape, reward, and identity. And eventually, the mere thought of removing it creates psychological resistance. So what do? We create good intentions. And good intentions feel productive. That's what makes them so dangerous. I spent decades with good intentions. I intended to stop drinking. I intended to gain control. I intended to eventually fix this growing problem in my life. And every morning, after another miserable night, those intentions became even stronger. I would think deeply about my future, about my health, about my family, about the embarrassment, the declining self-esteem, the fear. And strangely enough, the stronger those intentions became, the less likely I was to actually take action. Because intentions became a substitute for action. They created the illusion that progress was occurring, when in reality, absolutely nothing was changing. I had confused contemplation with movement. And I see this constantly in people trying to get sober. They are endlessly preparing to change, researching, planning, listening to podcasts, watching videos, setting dates, making rules, creating systems. Tomorrow becomes the sacred day where life will finally begin. But tomorrow is often just another form of avoidance, and alcoholics become masters of psychological negotiation. I'll quit after the football season. I'll cut back first. I'll wait until work settles down. I need to get mentally prepared. The problem is that preparation itself can become addictive, because preparation feels safe. Action does not. Action introduces uncertainty. Action risks failure. Action creates discomfort. Action exposes reality. Intentions protect us from all of that. The road to hell is paved with good intentions, because intentions allow us to emotionally experience the reward of change without enduring the pain required to create it. That was certainly true for me. For over 20 years, I knew alcohol was becoming destructive in my life. I knew it. Not abstractly, not intellectually. I knew it in the pit of my stomach. As a physician, I understood addiction. I understood consequences. I understood where this road led. And still, I continued drinking. That contradiction haunted me. How can somebody understand the danger so clearly, yet remain unable to stop? The answer was that insight alone changes nothing. Knowledge changes nothing. Intentions change nothing. Only action changes outcomes. Eventually, external forces intervened in my life. Treatment entered the picture. And to those listening, it is reasonable to conclude that treatment works primarily because it removes choice. And for me, in the beginning, that was true. The option to drink disappeared. There were expectations, there were urine screens, meetings, schedules, consequences. Initially, I approached treatment almost mechanically. Just show up. I didn't understand much of what people were talking about. Honestly, much of it sounded foreign to me. But something interesting happened. I began hearing stories, and those stories sounded disturbingly familiar. Different professions, different backgrounds, different personalities, but underneath, the same struggle, the same cycle of intentions followed by inaction, the same promises, the same negotiations, the same tomorrow. But there was one major difference between those who had recovered and those who remained trapped. At some point, the recovered individuals stopped waiting to feel ready. That was the difference. Not intelligence, not willpower, not moral superiority, action. Imperfect action, uncertain action, uncomfortable action, but action. They acted before certainty arrived, and that realization changed my understanding of recovery completely. Because eventually everyone leaves treatment. Eventually external controls disappear. Eventually you return to ordinary life, where once again you are responsible for your own action. And that's where many people discover the deeper problem. They were waiting for readiness, but readiness never comes first. Action comes first. Then readiness follows. This is true far beyond sobriety. I experience it almost every day when I go for a run. I've never had a single run where some voice inside me didn't attempt negotiation. You ran yesterday. It's too hot. You can skip today. You're tired. You'll do it tomorrow. That voice never disappears. What has changed is my relationship to it. I no longer interpret resistance as evidence that I shouldn't act. I expect resistance. And if I simply continue putting one foot in front of the other, something predictable occurs. The resistance weakens. Momentum builds. The run becomes manageable and often rewarding. Sobriety works the same way. Most people believe motivation creates action, but in reality, action often creates motivation. You do not wait to become fearless before acting. You act despite fear. You do not wait to become confident before changing. You change first, then confidence slowly emerges afterward. This was one of the most important lessons of my recovery. I stopped treating readiness as a prerequisite and started recognizing it for what it often was, a sophisticated defense mechanism protecting me from discomfort, uncertainty, and possible failure. And failure itself became less terrifying once I understood something important. You do not have to perform recovery perfectly for your life to improve dramatically. You simply need to interpret and resist the cycle of endless intention followed by endless delay. That's it. One action, one honest conversation, one sober day, one decision not to buy the bottle, one beginning. And yes, you may fail. I certainly did many times. But action teaches, action reveals, action creates movement. Intentions alone create fantasy. If you are somebody listening to this who sincerely intends to change, but whose start date always remains somewhere in the future, I would encourage you to question whether not ready is actually wisdom, or whether it's fear wearing a very convincing disguise. Because I spent decades waiting to become ready, and the truth was, I was never going to feel ready. I simply had to begin. And once I did, life finally started moving forward. Remember, giving up alcohol does not mean giving up anything real. It means finally stepping out of the imaginary world your intentions created and into a real one. If you're ready to actually make a change, I've created a 90-day sobriety survival kit to help you reassess your relationship with alcohol and to provide you specific strategies for reaching the important 3-month sober milestone. I've left a link for information about this in the description below. Also, please subscribe, like, and comment below. I read all the comments and I will respond. And while you're here, why not check out this video where I describe the 10 lies that kept me drinking for an extra 10 years. I'm Dr. Donald Crowe, and I'll see you in the next one.